of various colors and splashes and things like that throughout the tournament. We've also seen decks like Mason Grody's in round number 1, his Selesnya Heliod deck that featured a few copies as well. It's just a thing to do. Here's an extra value creature. And Moscow here on our right is taking the same approach, but this time in a very different shell. So this is actually going to be using Kappa Cannoneer alongside the well-known affinity cards, Memnites, Ornithopters, those kinds of cards, to assemble this affinity strategy. We've seen quite a bit of that in the various formats with the Improvise and Thought Monitor, things of that nature. But yeah, this just features Nadu and 3 Shuko as well, because Shuko, 1-mana artifact, makes all your artifacts cheaper. Also, you could just try to combo off, make a bunch of stuff. You want 4 Urza Saga anyway, so here it's very easy to find a Shuko. And Shuko's just like a real card, too. Getting an extra point of power is meaningful if you're playing an artifact-aggressive strategy.
Now, yeah, and you still have a combo kill, right? Like you're saying with Kappa Cannoneer, you put in your whole deck, you put in the Lightning Greaves in this case, which is an extra copy of Shuko here for Moscow's deck, and then you just attack with the Kappa Cannoneer that is probably big enough in those scenarios.
Right, exactly. And you have Shadow Spear to get through blockers. Like, you get to really do it all with your equipment and finish the game out that way. Sam here on our left, a little bit more of a traditional deck, playing Red and 6 Teferi Time Raveler, Omnath, but also featuring some new cards. We got 3 copies of Flage alongside the Solitudes, and then 2 copies of 6. So we have Red and 6, and we also just have 6 in this deck as well. 2 copies of that. So featuring some new cards in the 4-color Omnath, an archetype well known, but lighter on elementals. Remember, Fury is banned, as here comes quite a start here for Moscow. Beautiful Ornithopter and a Gilded Goose. Or it was just a Surveil land. A Shock land for Sam.
Yep. And that's one of the interesting things here about like the Horizon sets too, when you mentioned the 6, is we're getting to the point where we can start referencing, themselves. Where it's like, oh, Red and 6 from, 6 years ago or whatever. It's like, yeah, actually that's enough time where this is kind of a funny little joke on like kind of a cool idea for design that works well with this character. Let's make it happen. And, that is one of the things we get to see. And 6 is, we're talking about it being a little bit of a joke here. It is not a joke. Once that card hits the battlefield, if the game is about grinding, it is going to take over.
Right, and that's part of the power, right? 4-color Omnath certainly trying to grind the opponents out among the more, I guess, grindy. This is kind of the face of the grindy interactive Magic we've referred to pre-Modern Horizons 3. So the Modern Horizons 2 metagame is very much about that. Some elemental bannings along with Modern Horizons 3 has changed the texture quite a bit, but we see Sam here at 3-0-1 with a take on that, as here is Moscow on his kind of resurgence of an old deck, now featuring new cards like Kappa Cannoneer that add directly to the archetype, and things like Nadu that provide a pivot. Yeah, Red and 6, no targets, 2 O2s across the battlefield, so a little bit insured against getting that little bit of extra value from Ren being able to pick something off, but fetch land able to be picked up, I believe, for Sam. So
big value still be done. Yeah, big thing to keep in mind with this one as well, Drake, is Sam has these dress downs in his main deck. And that is a way to actually stop Nadu from comboing, but only for a turn, right? Because eventually they'll get the activate abilities back. But with 6, you can retrace that on your own instep in perpetuity, meaning that Sam actually has a little bit of a plan against these Nadu decks in his main deck, has a little bit of game against these Urza constructs, while also allowing him to go something like end of turn dress down, main phase of Flage, doesn't get the inner battlefield abilities, and suddenly, you're putting a lot of pressure on them as a Nadu just gets turboed out here.
I love this play from Moscow a lot. So this is actually one of the cool features. You don't have to hold it close to the chest like the combo decks do. You can choose to just jam your Nadu out, and it's like, okay, here's my Nadu, Winged Wisdom. You can see that on the screen. If you want to start targeting stuff, like I'm going to start drawing cards, I can do that too with my equipment. But also if you kill it, like I just don't care that much. I can just pivot back into my artifact plan, start activating my Urza Saga, making constructs, doing it that way. Now, the dress downs are good against all of that. They're good against the constructs, good against Nadu, so that's a really heads-up thing that Sam has available to him. But Moscow here, like I said, able to represent some of the power of just incorporating Nadu into his affinity artifact aggro strategy. It's just being able to jam it right into play and not necessarily have a plan for anything to do with it right away. It just attacks, it blocks, it's big, it's a 3/4 flyer. People don't normally attack with it, but it actually is very good at attacking and blocking too.
Yeah, Nadu is just kind of a nicely statted creature here. So you just see a prismatic and then come down, hits the Nadu, and Nadu, gets triggers whenever something like that happens. So that Nadu gets exiled. So James is going to,
oh my God, a card for your trouble too. This card just does it all.
Yeah. And, we see James has Shuko in hand. So if Sam doesn't have something like a Solitude in order to, answer this Nadu, things could be in big trouble.
A foil Shuko. Oh, what are those worth now? Whew. And here comes Nadu as well. Moscow, we know about Nadu. I mean, Sam knows about Nadu as well. There's nothing hidden about this Nadu. We just jam it or not. And it looks
I
like
think James is thinking about what creature is supposed to tap to the Springleaf Drum. And I think he decided, I'll leave the goose up in case I get another goose to make mana.
Right. And you can also,
right.
you can make some additional, you just make additional mana. That's really the entire equation is here comes the Shuko. So we're exploiting that. And off to the races, 3 cards. He's saying, I'm just going to do it all one shot. I don't care what happens in between. I'm doing nothing in between. So I'm going to do it all at once. I think that's a Cavern of Souls.
I agree. It is a Cavern
of Industry.
Yeah. And now we're doing a little counting to see if we can improvise. And also we have a Frogmite in this pile. So we can maybe just put that onto the battlefield. There are 3 artifacts currently. So if you played the Shuko, that would be the 4th. You can also play the Shadow Spear.
It was named with this cavern, but Kappa Cannoneer can come down right now. That'd be strong. Here's Shadow Spear.
Yep. That's going to be 4 things. And now we're going to get to, Shuko twice here with this Frogmite.
Frogmite's more cards. My God.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting things, right? Like James with having just these free spells with like Ornithopter and Frogmite, they work into the Shuko kind of engine. Yeah, we hit 2 more lands here, which means we can almost assuredly put this Kappa Cannoneer into play via improvising. The Shuko is mana neutral. We have all these other artifacts in play. Yeah, and
here it comes. Kappa Cannoneer, and that one doesn't need any help. I mean, of course, you can still Shuko it as well, so of course you still get your value. But I mean, Kappa Cannoneer here. I mean, what is this? Turn 3? It's crazy how much stuff has just happened here. We're going to put another Shuko in play because it is free to do. So you play it, tap it for improvise. So that's a free thing to do. And Kappa Cannoneer comes in. It does cost you a counter on your Kappa Cannoneer, but I don't think you're going to struggle to get those. As 2 more cards come along, including Springleaf Drum. Are we out of creatures finally?
Yeah, and we're out of it. And this is one of the interesting things, right? Like we get to play a game without Nadu. That's, able to like beat down a little bit and do stuff. But we also, when we Nadu, we don't always go through our whole deck like the Nadu combo deck would, right? And so in this situation, we're in an interesting spot from James where he just has like some, big creatures, accrued a lot of cards, and it's just hoping Sam doesn't have, something like Wrath Disguise with extra energy in order to like clean up the battlefield.
Yeah, Wrath of the Skies. I was about to say, what's the Wrath of the Skies count? That seems like one of the only outs here as a 3 mana Wrath. Of course, you guys have a 4th land to make it happen for 2 as well. That can clean up a lot of the garbage in Battlefield right now, including the Urza Sagas, who needs to have it now, does not. Okay, the One Ring does buy time, but a lot more cards are going to come from Moscow if this happens.
An interesting thing worth noting here from Moscow is he does not have a way to win the game if he like goes through his whole deck, right?
Right.
He does not have a Thassa's Oracle or anything like that in his main deck. He doesn't have, the Coliseum stuff. So we can just put a bunch into play. And if Sam can just like buy time and just, like sit here and exchange some resources, do the One Ring, and then eventually wrath the board, that would be enough to actually kind of, potentially win the game. As it looks like we are evoking a Solitude.
Yeah, it looks like we're evoking Solitude. Have to imagine that's going after Nadu. It sure is. So there goes Nadu. But I mean, the damage is very much done. I mean, you do have a One Ring online, so you're going to get a turn off. But I mean, you've got to be facing down lethal with these constructs and Kappa Cannoneer in the next turn, no matter what happens. So now the pressure's on. You have to find Wrath of the Skies. You need to find Dress Down. You need to find some way to clean up all this stuff. And then who knows what the leftovers looks like. I mean, that could still be a problem on its own.
All right, I see the line to victory for Sam. Next turn, Omnath, fetch, put another One Ring into play. Following turn, play 6 and start retracing the One Rings ad nauseum and just lock your opponent out of the game. Because Sam, the Civic Nadu deck here from Moscow does not have any way to push damage if the One Ring starts getting looped, and Sam can just assemble that loop. It's a little tough. It's not free. I'm not going to act like it is, but Sam has that available to him.
I mean, there's something. The point is, like, this board state looks hopeless. It's not actually. That's really the equation that's going on here. Is there are paths to victory still for Sam, and you can see him very calm, cool, collected, facing down all of the artifacts across the board. And this, again, this is what Affinity's always been about. It puts a bunch of stuff into play very quickly, and Nadu is certainly very powerful at making that happen as well. Here's another shell that Nadu can fit into, even if it is not as dedicated of a combo deck. Just getting Urza Sagas into play, we see contracts being made, Kappa Cannoneer growing. And basically, if Moscow is allowed to attack ever again with the board state as it is, the game is over. So the question is, what can Sam do to make that not the case? And you mentioned some One Ring loops, maybe some Wraths are available, dress down that mix as well.
Yeah, Wrath of the Sky is interestingly, it destroys artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So it will actually clean up this Urza saga as well. So that could be a thing where maybe, Sam just Wrath the Skies for a little bit, gets hit by a big Kappa Cannoneer, but isn't quite dead. Just basically gets like another turn and then works towards that stabilization we've been talking about. The One Ring will, Sam won't have issues providing cards. It's really about him having the specific cards at this point.
Right. Speaking of a little bit of filtering and selection, here's Inquisitive Puppet, a card not really seen too much in Modern, now getting its pedigree here. A 1-mana artifact creature construct from uncommon from Throne of Eldraine. Enters the battlefield, scry 1, kind of, I guess, an Urza Saga scry of some kind, analogous to the Surveil lands in its own way. And you can exile it to make a 1/1 human, so it can become a real boy. Isn't that cute?
Yeah, and the cool thing about the Puppet, too, is, like, we talked about this before, the cards coming in, like adding high power cards, means sometimes there are better things to enable them. Inquisitive Puppet is just like kind of 4 triggers for Nadu, right? You play it early, it helps your affinity stuff, and then you equip twice, then you exile it and make your little real boy, as it were, right? Your Pinocchio story. And then you equip it twice with the Shuko and get more cards. So this is a really cool kind of thing that gets to see play because of things like Nadu. That's pretty exciting. Now, this Kappa Cannoneer is suited up, Drake. It is.
I think we're going to attack Ren and gain a bunch of life. I think that is the plan here. So we've suited it up with the Shukos and everything and all the counters and the Shadow Spear. And now we're obliterating this Ren and 6 and going to gain a pile of life. So this is just a way to get some kind of value out of your attack step when nothing else matters. And so it's pretty heads up by Moscow. We've suited up the Turtle. The Blastoise has its Blastoise cannons and Shukos and is going to work on Ren and 6.
Yeah, Drake, I know this looks crazy. I think James did his thing. He got a lot of advantage. I think if Sam has like a Solitude or something that can stop some of the side aggression, block a little bit, gain some life, he might be able to really get out of this because there's not a ton of pressure outside of that construct and this Kappa Cannoneer. Now, we're able to make another construct and things like that, but if we can answer those efficiently, we could probably take a Kappa hit for a turn or two.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely closer than it looks. And part of that is the power of the One Ring, at this point, very well known in the Modern format. Nadu still kind of earning its stripes, but it appears to be of similar power level on first read. And, the same equation is going on where it's, okay, what's the best shell? And here is exactly that chain, right? Where, One Ring for the trigger, but keep the one on 2.
I like this from Sam. We talked about it. Sam's trying to set up, looping the One Rings and stuff like that. And he's very clear. He's like, yeah, I actually just need to draw a bunch of cards next turn.
I need the cards so bad. So I'll take the damage. That's fine. I need to not get beat down by your attack step. And I'm just going to save this and try to draw out of it. And I think we're reaching for the Gigantha now based on Moscow's posturing here. As here's more constructs. The board has more dice, more things moving around. Another Saga's going and digging. Not much left to dig for. Springleaf Drum and Shukos among the mix. I have to imagine it's Drum. I guess we have one more Puppet. So maybe it's the last Puppet. We have 2 of these Inquisitive Puppets in our deck.
Yeah, I could imagine Mimnite, Shuko, Puppet, Springleaf. There's just a billion things you can grab. Whatever makes the most sense to you, I think is probably reasonable.
I mean, yeah, once again, how much does it matter? Who knows? Gilded Goose maybe can start making some food, but for the most part, the One Ring doing kind of an old, this is what Ensnaring Bridge used to do to games of Modern, where you would just have this board state where it's, if you were ever allowed to attack, the game ended on the spot, but that is not what is going on here. The One Ring chains are enabling that, but it's got to keep going. As here comes the second Inquisitive Puppet. We drew it. Scry 1. Top, says Moscow.
Yep. I really think Sam has a third of the One Ring in hand, Drake, because he could have kept the other ring, and it would be the same number of cards over this one turn cycle. But on the following turn cycle, that's where we get really interesting, where we'd have one less card. So I think Sam is probably, I think the reason he's so calm is he just knows he's going to loop One Rings the whole game. As long as
I think we're sniffing it out. So what can we do about it? We can draw more cards. We have things like Thought Monitors and Thoughtcast, things of that ilk. Beseiju Who Endures, there's a single copy. There's a single copy of Odawara, but none of those really do anything.
Yeah, I think Moscow is just in a position where he is kind of stone cold dead to this one ring loop. Like his game one plan is just, I'm going to put a bunch of things in play and hope to overwhelm you. And it's a pretty good plan. If we didn't have that one ring on curve, we would have been in huge trouble. Unfortunately, right. We had the one ring on curve. We had the backup one. And so, this kind of, we're just calling bluff and not having anything that can answer the ring in your main deck, a reasonable place to be. But also sometimes they have the cards that need to beat you. And we're going to have to see that.
It's clear to me that if we don't have the one ring loop, that just like a massive Wrath of the Skies doesn't solve most of the problems, as here's a Surveil to the Graveyard. So once again, the power of one ring on full display here for the 4-color Omnath deck, as Moscow, this is the Indiana Jones reference where the guy's just like slinging swords all over the place and just gets blasted. It's like, no, none of your fancy posturing, all your permanents. I'm not scared of them. Have you read this one ring card? You read this thing?
Yeah, it's very nice.
Here,
I mean, this is kind of why you're seeing like some players play cards like Burst of Speed in Affinity with Kozilek's Unsealing, where they just draw their whole deck and then put in, the Burst of Speed. Everyone gains haste and they just attack.
Yeah, you can get it all done in one go instead of having to take that turn off.
Yeah, and you gain a little bit by playing Nadu. We saw how Nadu was able to, generate some advantage. And if you had to use removal on some of the other pieces, Nadu might have stayed around and got more cards. So, it's give and take, and it's early on, and players are going to figure it out. But a lot of differing builds of Affinity, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, certainly just people revisiting the archetype is part of what I love about these Horizon sets and stuff of that nature. Kappa Cannoneer, big upgrade for this deck, getting to do as well, icing on the cake. And here's another copy of the One Ring off of the mana from Omnath that was gained from fetching. So we played Arid Mesa, fetched, found a mountain, made 4 mana, and then used that to cast another copy of One Ring and kept, again, the one that has 3 counters on it around. So love this from Sam. Back over to Moscow we go, who scried this card to the top. He knows what this is and scried it on top. Let's see what he has.
Yeah, about Moscow, I'm honestly just trying to not put anything else on the battlefield, because now you're at the point with Omnath where Wrath of the Skies can actually clean everything up. Like, if you play a fetch land and fetch, that would be X is potentially 9, and that would clear the board. So it doesn't even need to be the One Ring loops. I think, we're probably going to see Moscow not do much more and hold up his Urza Saga and, kind of pray that he just doesn't get One Ring or Wrath of the Skies out of this game.
Yeah, anything that doesn't draw a card or give you more access to cards in your deck is just doing the same thing. Like, it's already over lethal if you are ever allowed to attack. So adding more things to the board doesn't make any sense when there are wraths in the format that punish you for doing so.
Yep. And you also need to be wary of time, right? Like, both players are playing quickly. I don't think anyone's playing slowly, but it's a situation where it's just like, listen, your Nadu thing doesn't always win. It takes a while to resolve. And, getting those extra, 1 or 2 minutes could be huge.
Right.
And
activating equipment of some kind here. Permanents lose indestructible. So we have blown up the One Ring by making so we activated Shadow Spear, made it lose indestructible, uses our 1 copy of Besieger Who Endures to blow up the One Ring on 3.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. If Sam does not have another 6 or anything like that, this could be game ending. He does gain 4 life, which is nice. He goes up to 19. Now that Kappa Cannoneer is incredibly large, as are the construct tokens. So we're going to need a dress down or something like that if we're going to not die. But, Sam, there's a lot of pressure to have a lot of it this game. And so far he's had it, but can he keep it going without the One Ring to buy that time?
Yeah, it's weird. The weird 1 mana ability on the equipment, permanents your opponent's control, lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Coming up here as blowing up the One Ring is something that Moscow needs to do now without that injection of 4 more cards for Sam. I mean, the life doesn't matter. The damage is not going to kill Sam. So Moscow has damage covered. Now the question is, has the cards that Sam has already drawn yielded enough that he doesn't, losing that One Ring doesn't matter. He's been through 3 of them. So now it's time for something like 6 to come into play, or this big Wrath of the Skies, like you mentioned. So we're very quickly playing Wooded Foothills and fetching. Omnath is going to trigger the first time. It looks like the second time as well.
Yeah, and I think with the way Sam's playing, he either has, he has the exact card, he's 1, or he's like, I only have 1 play. Yeah, he's playing with a purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing. There's no dilly-dallying. He knows he's either has the game won or he's on a Hail Mary. And I'm very excited to see which one it is here.
Yeah, Moscow, lots of dilly-dallying, lots of artifacts all over the place, dillying and dallying, and Sam less so. One card in play at a time for the most part. Here comes a big Wrath of the Skies. Yeah. So, okay, 4 mana floating plus 5. That is for 7?
Yeah, and 7 kills everything, Drake, including that Urza Saga.
Yeah. Everything. Kappa Cannoneer, and Thought Monitor, the whole 9. I mean, it does get the Omnath, but it also gets like half of Moscow's deck or something.
Yeah, also, I think one thing to note here, too, Sam has some other follow-up play, because he could have spent 3 more mana just to gain energy. Like, make X10 and then spend 7, so that if James goes, all right, well, here's my board again, like maybe he's holding Shuko Nadu in hand or something, and the Dragantha, Sam's just like, whatever, kill you again. You know what I mean? So this, to me, if I was James, I'd be like, oh, no, I'm getting Wrath, and he has some spell he wants to play. Like,
yes, some kind of follow-up. Yeah. Crack Food, up to 33 goes Moscow. And life total, certainly for both players, not really the thing that appears to matter on this current board. You can't even exile the Inquisitive Puppets and make anything happen. Everything is bad, as here goes all of the permanents. So this is something that we mentioned earlier, could have been one of the outs. Gets the Saga as well. Lots of lands left in play for now, but on Instep, these Glimmer Points go away too.
Yeah, you better have it quickly. And Sam, you know, in a great position, played around Metallic Rebuke as well by leading up to 3 mana. Now that isn't something he has to worry about. And all right, looks like he's just going to hold his mana up. And yeah, the Glimmer Voids are gone.
So what does 3 mana mean from this deck? I mean, Flage was a 3 mana spell I was looking at as potentially available. It's Midnight, it's Gigantha. That is... And Cranial Plating. That's all of the leftovers. That's all of Moscow's hand. So all the Nadu, all the other stuff, this is what's left. And now we know Sam has a ton of mana. Leyline Binding on Instep will take care of Gigantha. Just Memnite and Cranial Plating left in play. The whole board cleaned up. And Wrath of the Skies, I mean, what a display for that card.
Yeah, it was minus. And Wrath of the Skies, when it first saw, a lot of players were like, well, Supreme Verdict, 4 mana, you know, kind of nice, right? Like, just answers everything. Why would I have to spend like way more? But sometimes your deck can get way more mana than that. And also this answers so many different things. And that's why we're seeing players like it, is because, you know, against a deck like Hammer, which isn't really part of the metagame, it's insane. But also if you can just like interact and make land drops, it's way, way stronger than a card like Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, I compare it more to Pernicious Deed. It scales like that card and answers similar cards. As back over to Moscow we go. We saw Flage finally come down as well, and that one went face and changed the life totals a little bit. Card well known at this point. Plenty of mana to flash that one back and start going to work. You mentioned gets the game over with quickly, even from 30. Moscow does not have a lot of time. This Flage is coming back, and it looks like, you know, even though Sam was never really able to assemble like the one ring kind of looping like we were talking about, Wrath of the Skies was on time, on schedule, able to clean everything up. There was a problem. There wasn't really a great follow-up from Moscow, and now Flage and Ren look primed to clean up the leftovers.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about in the early rounds with Flage, if you were here for that, is she kills incredibly quickly. You know, when this card was first spoiled, Drake, a lot of people were like, well, Croxa, you know, is probably a little bit stronger, comes down sooner, fights over the hands. Like, is Flage really going to see play? And I think the thing that, you know, we've seen over this first couple of weeks is, well, Flage contests the battlefield and then always does damage. You know, Croxa sometimes does damage. But against James here, maybe it would discard like a Springleaf Drum, right? If that had been like the end game of choice. Doesn't do as much and doesn't stabilize you as well. As Nadu does come off the top.
Nadu, a big draw, and Cranial Plating able to start getting that to work, but Dress Down right on time to stop that from happening. Now, just like the other Titans, you can actually do the Flage Dress Down trick too to get it in play and keep it to stay in play. Don't save that much mana, but does save cards in graveyard. But yeah, like you mentioned, the big drawback from the original Titans was that they didn't really interact with the board. Uro was great because the life gain kind of acted as a time walk some amount of the time. But for the most part, the downside to them was that you're paying mana and not impacting the board. Flage impacts the board, and that is a huge shift for a card that goes straight to the graveyard the first time you play it.
Yep, very massive. And, you know, I myself was playing some with this. Obviously, I love Flage a lot as the person who pitched it. But, like, I was playing, like, a bunch of Dress Downs in my deck because of Nadu. And also just to have that, like, high roll, like, end of your turn 2, Dress Down, my turn 3 Flage. And, yeah, I'm tapped out for a turn. But on the next turn, I've got a Flage that can start attacking. And in some matchups, it's unbeatable. So it's a really interesting card that's seeing a ton of play as Teferi Time Reveler comes down.
It's a fairy time arrival. It doesn't add a lot to the board state. It does keep the cards running, as Bobble's also added to the board state, throwing more cards in the graveyard. So if Flay just somehow answered, now we are already primed and ready to go to get it back. And yeah, it's going to be just a cranial plating on top. So that's not going to be enough. And Sam going to win this game number 1 here over James Moscow, able to assemble the Nadu combo, if you will, in his Nadu Affinity deck. But because it is not a dedicated Nadu combo deck, he had to pass the turn and really only wins in combat. And that spelled disaster for him, as the One Ring was able to buy enough time.
Yeah, the One Ring did what it did and helped stabilize. And Sam's deck of being able to battle through creatures, successfully battled through creatures. Let's check out what Moscow has at the sideboard. See if it can take over.
Yeah, so Nadu Affinity, as you can see, got some Gilded Gooses, got some other things. That's a Civic deck at heart. And yeah, the sideboard, we actually kind of branch out from that. We got 3 copies of Deafening Silence, 2 copies of the One Ring, 2 copies of Metallic Rebuke, 2 Galvanic Blast, 1 Nature's Claim, 1 Grafter's Cage, 1 Pithing Needle, a second copy of Besieger Who Endures, 1 Haywire Might, and your companion, Gigantha the Wellspring. What do you like here against a 4-color Omnath control deck?
So Haywire Might's a must. It answers Leyline Binding. It answers the One Ring. It's just a premium card. Boseiju similarly answers Binding. Also answers Dress Down. You know, kind of a hidden mode, but like if you do that in response when I'm trying to combo you, I'd very gladly, you know, spend a green in order to get my abilities going again. So I love those two. I want to get them in. Pithing Needle similarly stops the One Ring. I'll be interested to see if Moscow wants to bring in the One Rings in order to battle through opposing removal. I could totally see that as a line. It's, you know, available to you. And Nature's Claim, similar reasons to the other cards I mentioned. I could see that coming in. You do want to keep your core of your deck together. So Moscow might choose to only do a couple of these things. But the one thing I know for sure is Haywire, Might, and Boseiju are going to definitely slot into this deck for the post-board games.
The one question I have is, do you keep the Nadus in? So is this something you're looking to keep intact with these Nadu decks? Now, this is not something I expect you to have the answer to. The card's brand new. And it's something that I just kind of want to highlight is part of kind of splitting the difference and having this Nadu pivot means that you could take out some number of Nadus and Shukos to bring in this other stuff and just go straight Affinity and not really rely on Nadu. And maybe the dress downs get a little bit worse. Now, because they're going to get your constructs, maybe that's not it, but something to keep in mind when you're talking about sideboarding for this kind of deck. Now, let's go over to Sam's deck and his take on 4-color Omnath. And let's have a look at his sideboard. So we got a lot less one-ofs in this side. We got 3 White Orchid Phantom, 3 Endurance, 2 Damping Sphere, 2 Deafening Silence, 2 Pick Your Poison, 1 Besieger Who Endures, another copy of Wrath of the Skies, and another copy of Prismatic Ending. What do you like here against the Affinity deck?
So I love Wrath. We saw how good it was in that game. Even early, just being able to like blow up, you know, Springleaf Drums and Ornithopters might leave the opponent stuck with cards in hand. Prismatic Ending is very similar. Just sort of a card that can answer something like Shuko. If they play it early, you might just be able to snag it, and then the Nadu is a lot less effective. So I like that one. Boseiju, Pick Your Poison. Pick Your Poison, a little less effective in these matchups because there are so many artifacts, but is a good way to fight over Urza's Saga. In particular, you can also name Flying Creature, get Nadu. So it's a little bit better than it might be against traditional Affinity. Against like actual Affinity, I maybe bring in 1 if I have a dead card, but here, maybe not the case. Then the rest of it, not really a huge fan of these cards against it. I'm sure some people have tried stuff like Damping Sphere, especially against this version of Nadu, where you do have to actually cast cards. But I imagine that's not what I want. Looking at my main deck, I feel pretty good about all this. It seems like Sam has a very well-built 4-color deck that, you know, is pretty tuned, pretty clean, and is just looking to kind of grind and has a lot of tools to grind through creatures, you know, and has a lot of concessions to the deck's new cards, right? Like 1 Bobble in the main deck and stuff like that. As the players are underway, they can't wait to play Gilded Goose.
Yeah. He quickly kept their hands, quickly got their sideboarding done, and Gilded Goose here on turn 1 for Moscow. A pair of Nadu in hand as well. Just a, looks like a Surveil land for Sam on turn 1. I believe that is Thundering Falls. Quick check. Yeah, I believe there's a copy of Thundering Falls, and that is it on the battlefield there for Sam. As we go back to Moscow, has the option to play turn 2 Nadu, but does not have a Shuko to get anything started right away. So we'll see if we want to maybe do something instead. As Besieger Who Endures is actually played as a land for turn. We do want to play Nadu Winged Wisdom, the profile art, and we're going to go ahead and solitude that, I believe, right away. And that is going to buy Metallic Rebuke off the top from the trigger.
Yeah, interesting from Sam there that he wanted to immediately kill the Nadu.
Strange.
I would have imagined he wanted to take his draw step, but maybe he's afraid of some, you know, way to trigger Nadu immediately. So Gonna
Yeah,
pass
yeah,
turn.
it would have to be something like mostly free, no mana left over. Yeah, it's quite strange.
Yeah.
One Ring picked up, so we did heavy sideboarding, did Moscow.
Mhm.
No second, oh, sorry, second land is Windswept Heath for Sam, but no turn to play, which means no Ren. I
Oh
think Moscow
no.
has to be pretty happy about that.
Drake, I think our third land in the last line of hand is Glimmer Void with no artifact that we can play that's like an actual play. Like you can play Nadu, but then the Glimmer Void dies. And you can play some, yeah, and we just have to pass because we need to make a food so we don't lose
Yeah,
the
you have to
Glimmer
make a
Void.
food. I mean, you can make a food main phase, but then you don't have. I mean, you don't have Metallic Rebuke up anyway. So I feel like you're supposed to just make a food, play your Glimmer Void. I mean, if you get your food answered, that kind of sucks.
Yeah,
But does it really? Like they use the prismatic ending to just answer your land, basically. Is that maybe that's scary enough? I don't know. Moscow agrees and is not going to make any play and pass the turn. So this hand has looked really awkward. The Nadu's. I mean, it drew a card coming and going, but it was very mana intensive. And this doesn't feel like an affinity hand at all, whereas the game one hand did.
yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like that gives you a lot of game in other matchups. But against a deck like Sam, if you're trying to grind, there are many reasons you don't see Jund anymore. A big reason is those kind of decks cannot hang with 4-color. When 4-color sees Tarmogoyf Jundi decks, the mouth salivates. You're like, oh yeah, you want to trade cards? Let's trade cards. Let's go. Let's see what you can do. And Moscow's doing not exactly that, but kind of a slower, grindier game here. And Sam's fine playing those games.
Yeah, obviously that is clearly the case here. Is 4 mana for the One Ring. So that one's going to keep the Glimmer Void around, provided it resolves just fine. Now there is a lot of exile effects in Sam's deck if that's what he chooses to reach for. It's not that hard to get rid of the One Ring. And here is Leyline Binding, which is one of them. You have to imagine that is coming after the One Ring. Yeah, draw card.
I love Moscow. It's like target.
you want my goose? Huh?
My goose? Did you want the goose is loose? I'll let you. I just want to make sure.
You tell me.
Love that from Moscow. And Sam there too could have waited to maybe grab the One Ring activation, but it seems like kind of knew his mana was going to be spoken for, and so I was like, yeah, you're going to draw a card, but I get to use all my mana the way I want to, and that is very important in decks like this. So.
Yeah, it can be clunky if you're not allowed to use your mana the way you want. And Brennan 6, kind of a clunky play, even on this board still. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want to hit your land drops. It's a powerful card. It has a lot of modern pedigree at this point. People are calling for it to be banned at some point. What happened here? Okay, there's a Boseiju. I was like, we just put Urza Saga in the graveyard. I don't know what happened there. There's a Boseiju in hand for Sam. Now, we've assembled Ren plus the Boseiju loop. That's a very different texture than just hitting your land drops with Windswept Peeps and things like that. Now, this is a real problem for Moscow and his all artifacts deck.
Yeah. And one of the benefits he has is if he can get going, he'll overwhelm the Boseiju, right? He will just present more artifacts than Boseiju can really answer. The problem is he needs to get going. And so far, we've been having a little bit of an issue getting off the ground. We've had a little bit too slow of a start, and Sam has had just the right answers. So Moscow can overpower this card, but it's going to take a little bit of work on his end. And, he's really wanting to hold up and represent this Metallic Rebuke, which makes sense. He wants to make sure that nothing like the One Ring or Omnath comes down to how devastating it was. But it can be very punishing as, you play a Glimmer Void and pass the turn is not what you want to see, Drake.
No, I mean, yeah, we're doing all this just to hold up Metallic Rebuke, and you can even make a food and then Metallic Rebuke, and that's part of the draw to this hand, or to this sequencing rather. But I mean, it's a tough spot because you're not advancing your board. You're really playing into what the 4-color Omnath deck kind of wants to be doing anyway, which is just like holding up mana and passing the turn or whatever. Okay, here's my Omnath. Like I'm gonna have mana. I'm gonna overpower you on mana. And so we did all this just to Metallic Rebuke, and that's probably going to work. But, we didn't really solve any of the problems. We're no closer to getting any kind of Nadu things assembled. With the Saga answered, we're no closer to getting Sam dead. Still at a very healthy 18. And it's just a kind of a tight spot here for Moscow. But one Omnath down, and if Sam's leftovers are kind of unexciting, maybe we have time to find something like a Shuko or something to really get Moscow's hand going.
Yeah, and it looks like what Sam's doing is he kind of ran into the Metallic Rebuke and was like, yeah, whatever, you got me. I have a bunch of clunky cards in hand. I'm going to get got. Who cares? And now it's just prismatic ending down this Ornithopter to kind of do what we talked about and be like, hey, I'm going to try and prevent you from going too much momentum on the board because, I know you're going to make a food. Your affinity card can cost a lot less. And I have this Boseiju that can run you out if I'm given the time.
Yeah, that exchange with the prismatic ending is a great for Moscow overall. Like that is something that you're excited to see, even though you still don't really have a lot going. But there's a lot of pressure on this next turn or two to get something going. And we'll see exactly if he can. I think he did find another copy of Metallic Rebuke and another Goose, which is not great. There's still a Kappa Cannoneer hanging out somewhere. Yeah, here is Gilded Goose. Makes a food when it comes in. And we could improvise out Cannoneer if we want. Looks like the answer is we do want. And this allows us to keep up Metallic Rebuke. So we can tap Cannoneer and then sacrifice the foods to Metallic Rebuke still. So we can't. Or a mana short.
Yeah,
because the other Goose is summoning 6. So we don't get to keep. I lied to you. We do not need to keep up Metallic Rebuke.
It's all good. It's a very confusing board state. And, Kappa Cannoneer has Ward 4. Players joke that's basically hexproof. It is not hexproof right now against.
It's not hexproof. Yeah, it's not hexproof at all in this matchup. As here's Wrath of the Skies for 1.
Yeah, and you see Sam's just like, well, this is what it is.
That gets the Geese. What are we doing? No, that's the summoning sick Gilded Goose. This
is an illegal play.
Yeah, we can't do that. That Metallic Rebuke casting doesn't work for the reasons that I deduced. So we need
we need to get the judge involved.
Judge,
now,
please.
What's going to end up, and we're getting a judge over there right now. It's going to probably end up happening is we're just going to rewind. It's just an honest mistake. It happens. These players have a lot going on, and it's going to be the exact same board state, just minus the Goose. The Geese are going to be dead, and we'll have the Metallic Rebuke back on our hand from Moscow.
Yeah.
But, Sam
does inform this turn as we're just deploying more stuff and fetching on end step here. Could get another Surveil land. And we're talking.
Yep. The foods.
I believe the judge has interrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah, the foods were tapped, but the second Goose, there was one Goose that was suddenly sick, one that was not.
Yes.
And that Metallic Rebuke was illegally cast. So these players are discussing that right now. Sam, hand in hair. That one is tough.
Yeah, definitely an awkward spot to be, but I think it's a pretty easy fix.
Yeah, we caught it pretty soon. There's only been like one turn that has happened. So I think there is still time to sort this out without just being like, all right, play it as it lies. Now that may still be the ruling. The judges are going to get that figured out right away. And whatever happens with that is going to happen. But honestly, it doesn't feel like it changes that much about what's happening here because things are still going to play out. It's just Moscow's going to have a Rebuke in hand and no Geese, and these Geese aren't really adding a whole lot to this board state right now anyway. So
as long as the Shuko doesn't get drawn, the game will probably be almost exactly the same. If a Shuko gets drawn, the Goose are loose. But for the most part, I imagine it is not like the end of the world. That being said, we are going to try and make sure the game state is as right as it can be, and our head judge will be involved with this. We're going to figure out, should we rewind, everything like that. Moscow will get a warning for. I guess I assume both players will get a warning.
I think both players get a warning in this situation. I mean, I don't want to speculate too much, but I think both players needed to understand and maintain the game state there. So,
and there was no real plays made with the extra information, right? Like Sam clearly wrath disguised the way he did to clean the board up to then pick the poison down.
Pick the poison. Right.
Yeah, and James, gonna probably play Nadu. James doesn't play Nadu with even with Metallic Rebuke in hand. What's he gonna do? Die to Ren 6 picking up lands to play around the Metallic Rebuke. So a lot of this is gonna end up being the same, not the end of the world. I'll tell you what is the end of the world if you don't click follow on Twitch straight, because then you won't be able to see all this awesome Magic coverage here from NRG. We are doing the event all day today, including the top 8. I am commentating with Devin O'Donnell, better known as Doomwake, starting next round, and we're going to do the rest of the Swiss and the entire top 8 tonight. So if you stay tuned, you will see a champion crown tonight. And then tomorrow, you and Devin are going to be doing our Pioneer 5K leaderboard points, and it's going to be very exciting to see sort of who ends up winning the race there. So make sure to click that follow button. That way you don't miss any of the action this weekend or in coming weekends. Maybe we can pull up a slide real quick to show where we're coming up next to. Do you want to come out and play? I believe we're next going to Madison. As it looks like, really quick here, Chicagoland, July 13th and 14th. We have a Modern 10K Showdown on Saturday and Sunday, a 5K Legacy trial. If you love Legacy, we love you. Come out and play. And the Modern 10K Showdown, if you win one of those, you do go to our end of the year championship events as we are just discussing with the judge, and they're fixing the game state. And we'll bring you back there in a second. But, come on out, do that. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to be Modern post the Pro Tour, which is next weekend. We have a lot of players here this weekend who are actually playing the Pro Tour, getting some practice. And, some of them, like Connor Mullally, are undefeated right now at the Nadu combo deck. You got to be feeling good about that before the Pro Tour. You're undefeated in a nice big tournament. You're doing your thing. You're, get a little sweat off. You're like, okay, I can do this. This deck isn't so bad, not so insurmountable.
Yeah, it's also the beginning of season 2. So if you feel like you're behind on the championship race, you're behind on the leaderboard, that's obviously true. This is the end of season 1 here, but the Chicagoland event that you're looking at next is actually the beginning of season 2. There's 4 events in season 2, and ton of money. As you can see, here's all of our season 2 events you're going to get a look at here. So Chicagoland, you saw that event in July, and then each month following, except of course October. So we have August, we'll be in Madison, Wisconsin for a double Showdown weekend, one in Modern and then one in Standard Modern Legacy team Showdown, so where the entire team will qualify. And then, of course, Louisville, close to home for me, September 14th, 15th, are going to be in town for Modern and Standard Showdown every single weekend. And then wrapping things up with another double Showdown weekend in November in Indianapolis in Modern and Pioneer, crowning champions and crowning people that are going to be playing in our end of the year championship. But of course, that represents all of season 2. And there are 2 at-large bids available for point leaders for season 2. So if you weren't able to make it out to enough events in season 1, or you didn't really get anything started, whatever, you're behind a little bit, but you can still make a run at the end of the year championship by earning a bunch of points and succeeding in specifically season 2. So it's a great time to come out, great time to get started at our events. And like you see here, $6,500, or sorry, 65,000 is how words work. $65,000 to play for through season 2. Lots of RC invites, the tokens, of course, that we talked about before this event started, before this round started. Ultimate Guard products. This series is sponsored by Ultimate Guard. You get products if you top 16, sleeves if you top 16, and then if you top 8, you also get deck boxes. There's just all kinds of goodies to play for, whether or not you care about points or even the cash or whatever. Lots to play for at these NRG events. Make your way out. Mark your calendars. Season 2 right here in front of you, as these players are still talking about how to rebuild this board state. Very complicated board state to look at. Let's check in real quick. So it looks like we are okay. Yeah, we're still just talking things through.
This might be a situation too where, like, the judge has a ruling and they just want to confirm with the head judge, and now we're conveying the information again to the head judge just to make sure we get the game state as accurately recreated and do what's according to the rules. We want to make sure that we make the game as clean as we possibly can. And it's looking to me like, we're ending up kind of where we should be, right? Like, it looks like Moscow's about to put the gooses in the yard. We're going to pick up the rebuke.
Rebuke in hand. Now, the question is, do we get to rewind this turn? Because theoretically, you could hold up rebuke if you wanted to. If that's something.
Yeah. If I'm Sam, I'm like, you sure? You sure you don't want to untap everything? You don't want to hold up the rebuke?
Yeah, exactly. Putting to do and play. I mean, pretty strong. Only one card in hand for Sam. So, yeah, I imagine this is actually kind of fine for Moscow, to be honest with you. Like, he still gets a Nadu. He has a counterspell now. And like that's not trivial to not matter. Future Wrath of the Skies are going to be susceptible to this if that's your way to kill Nadu. So, it's not clear to me that this is even a bad spot for Moscow, which is weird to say.
Yeah, also, this is going to help with, like, Flasias. We don't have one right now, but if one tries to get escape pretty soon, that could be, combined with a Ren 6 to actually kill the Nadu, but then you have, the counters that pay 3. So, on a long enough timeline, Sam's going to make a bunch of land drops with Ren 6, not the end of the world. And we're just going to pick up with our fetch here. Since, the top of Sam's deck didn't really change from the game state happening, so he's just going to continue to be like, yep, I want to get this Surveil land.
Yep, makes sense. And like I said, the game is still anybody's game, so we did get all that corrected. And we're in a spot now where I believe even the Ren ability, trying to pick off the Mem Knight, is going to trigger Nadu and get some more value going for James, which is a great spot. We were talking about being able to get something going from nothing as an affinity deck. Typically, you're talking about a critical mass deck that needs a lot of artifacts in order to reduce the cost of your artifacts that already exist and get to a critical mass of stuff in order to overwhelm your opponent. Right now, you don't have anything really going. You have 3 lands down to 2 and a creature. So if you're going to get some material going, to do is certainly how that starts. Now, obviously, Shuko is one of the ideal ways to really get that going. But in the absence of Shuko, just even having your stuff picked off at a 2-for-1 rate is fine for you. As Flage gets surveilled to the yard.
Yeah,
Uh-oh!
there she comes. And, we talked about it before. You can now escape the Flage, shoot the Nadu. You'll get a trigger, but you'll get to shoot it. And then you can Ren and 6 minus, and then, finish off that Nadu, have a Flage in play. And, James is going to draw 2 cards for your trouble, but the odds of him drawing cards that can really get you out of this situation are pretty low. Oh, he just has a Solitude.
Yeah,
Disregard.
sure. Yeah, he picked up a land, had Solitude already. There is Glimmer Void going after the Nadu with the Solitude. So the Glimmer Void's going to get to stay in play. Metallic Rebuke, Moscow's only card in hand, and so that's a very, very timely Solitude. And Galvanic Discharge, able to take care of the last Memnite. And that's going to make the Glimmer Void go away. And yeah, things got very, very, very bad for Moscow in one turn cycle. Again, only 1 card in hand there for Sam. And basically that turn went best possible.
Yeah, and it feels like this is a tough spot for Moscow to get back out of, because we're kind of in a weird, like the squeeze, as it were, almost, right? Where if the Ren 6 takes up and picks up a Sage, my stuff's dead. If Ren 6 ultimates, then it has Wrath the Skies and Discharge and,
pretty good on Retrace. Yeah, that's nice.
It's like really your best line is hope that the Ren 6 takes up. He does not pick up the Boseiju and you draw your Pithing Needle, because otherwise, Sam is sort of kind of got the keys to the castle right now.
And then even then, you need to not die to Flage. Oh, okay. We found the ultimate button. Okay, that's not good.
Oh no, Sam remembered it's unbeatable.
Yeah. So now, Flage is weird because it doesn't. It exiles the stuff you want to retrace. So
yeah, there is some awkwardness for sure. This is also part of the energy package is very nice with Wrath the Skies. It's also why you don't see it in Holy Heat. We saw a little bit of Mishra's Bauble and Holy Heat 4-color near the end of Yorion. And Mishra's Bauble, incredible with 6, just turns all your lands into redraws. But, Sam sort of, doesn't really want that awkwardness with Flage. Ornithopter.
Ornithopter on time and on schedule. We have Metallic Rebuke and Thought Monitor, the leftovers from Moscow. Really needs to get this Thought Monitor reduced in cost if we're going to stay in this game. As back to Sam we go with a Ren Ultimate that you cannot see on screen. Solitude laying the beatdowns, getting some life back.
Drake, Sam, do you think we're going to symbol Exodia better than a 6+ Ren 6?
Unclear. I'd like to. Okay, we're discarding... Oh boy, we're discarding a land to put that on top. No, put it in the exile. So we Prismatic Ending. Okay. Yeah. And there's the Ren emblem, so we're representing that. Here is a Spire of Industry.
Right. Yeah, I've done a lot of 4-coloring in my day. This is my favorite time. You just click buttons
when your opponent continues playing. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I had this experience with Jace the Mind Sculptor a lot of times back in the day. It's we can, I got more fetch lands. I can brainstorm more times. I don't know what you want from me. You have no cards in hand. I have 12. Okay. In this case, you have your entire graveyard in hand as lands. I just don't know. I don't see a path forward.
Yeah, it's gonna require, I think, Sam doing something a little bit, aggressive when he doesn't maybe need to,
Sure.
And then flooding out in a way that James can overpower with Thought Monitors, because we don't have a ton of pressure right now. We just have this Solitude. Now, the moment we decide to bring back Flage, that's going to be a lot of pressure. But that's probably your best route to victory if you're James.
Right. Yeah, you can't draw 6. You can't draw Ren and 6. You can't draw the One Ring. There's just so many good draws in Sam's deck, and lands still represent removal spells. One Ring might be how it starts for James. Okay.
Yeah, Moscow picking up the ring is huge. This is the thing you needed. And you have to hope there's no binding. But,
yeah. That's true. That's a binding. Oh, no.
Well, if you're Moscow, you might as well keep gaming.
This is brutal. Another leyline binding coming down. So this is I mentioned Modern kind of returning to form, returning to the Modern as I know it, with the Modern Horizons 3 cards. This is the Modern as it was. This is Modern Horizons 2. This is what we had to deal with, is this. Just all your cards are blank because I have so many exile effects and things of that ilk. And here comes Flage finally to get things over with in a more rapid pace. The Titan of Fire's Fury going to be dealing some damage to Moscow. And of course, an attack with Solitude going to help with that as well.
Yeah, Drake, what can I say but you're welcome on Flage? Ending games a lot quicker.
Ending games extremely based, as the kids say.
But like seriously, one of the things that I really like about kind of how things seem to be landing so far is that there's a good mixture of like these decks that we saw, the interactive decks, like Boros Energy has been doing pretty good. This deck, right? There are ways you can kind of grind still 1-for-1, but it isn't so clearly the best thing to do by a lot. And there's a lot more balance in the metagame where it felt like, not always, but at certain points in Modern, especially over the last year or so, just grinding was the best thing you could do. As we do see Sam take it over Moscow and is going to move on to 4-0-1. Still 3 rounds left. Very much live for our top 8.
Very live.
Is Sam.
Yeah, and Flave's looking great in that deck. I mean, you mentioned a card you had a lot of hand in designing, and a card that looks to be basically exactly what these more controlling decks are looking for. A removal spell. What it tangibly is in most of these decks is a Lightning Helix that's overcosted that as the game goes on just also gives you a threat to close the game. And that is more or less what a lot of these controllers are looking for. A lot of the finishers that you could play in Modern were either weak, bad, or whatever. They were not good to draw, and you couldn't find them often enough. Whereas Flage you could play in high numbers because it represents as a removal spell that also gets the game over with quickly. So that's also going to fit pretty naturally into the 4-color deck as well. And ends up looking great. So awesome job on that. And that is also going to do it for our round number 5 here in St. Louis. Remember, this is part of the Modern 10K, the end of season 1 and the end of my time in the booth. So Mason's going to be taking a quick break and coming back with Doomwake, Devin O'Donnell. I'll be signing off and covering some Pioneer tomorrow. But for now, that is the end. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and support NRG series. And we'll be back with more post-Modern Horizons 3 Modern very shortly. Don't go anywhere.